Hi and welcome. My name is Ryan Thomas and I'll be the host for this TLC session, Best Practices for Promoting Tutoring Services to Male Ashford Students for Educators and Advisors, presented by Holly Ourso. We're excited that you've joined us here today to hear Holly's presentation. The chat window will be open up at the end of the presentation, so feel free to participate or ask questions then. Please welcome Holly.
Hi everyone, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here and thanks for attending the presentation live. I'd like to report out on my study on the best practices for promoting tutoring services to male Ashford students. I received a UFP grant for this earlier this year. The study is in progress and final results will be reported out in 2018. So let's kick this off with a poll. I have two poll questions, one for teachers and one for advisors. So Ryan, I don't know if you're ready with that. So the first poll question is, if you are a teacher, do your courses offer the free tutoring? It started out as a small project and now it has expanded, and if VP Mindy Sloan's office has its way, it will expand even further.
Participants can just raise their hand within the chat box.
Okay, great. Oh, thank you, okay. All right, so at least one other person has their class offering free tutoring. I know not everyone does, and some people have, oh, a few more people. Okay, great. All right, here's the second question. If you are an advisor, do you ever encounter students who don't want to go to the tutoring? Or I guess if you're a teacher, you could also answer this one if you have students who say, oh, I don't want to use the tutoring or whatever. And you can just raise your hand in the chat. Two participants raise hands. So we have this great service that's offered, and it's offered in more and more classes, but there are some students that don't wish to take advantage of it. So with that, let's see if we can make this work. What turns out is that male Ashford students underutilize the tutoring, even in classes which offer free online tutors. So my aim is to discover here how to best promote tutoring services so that male students will reach out for tutoring assistance, especially in those cases where it makes the difference between passing and failing. It turns out that according to VP Mindy Sloan's office, students who utilize the tutoring earn more points in the classes, they drop less often and pass more frequently. The bottom line is this impacts retention. What I really want to know is how to entice male Ashford students to utilize the tutoring in those special cases where it could make the difference in terms of passing their current class and succeeding in college. So I proposed a survey. I'd like to gain insight into the student views, see if I can pick some people's brains and then come out with some ideas of what we could do to make the tutoring more attractive to those people who maybe really do need it. There have been other studies on men's help seeking behaviors, including in the medical field and in academics. According to the SDSU course, Black Minds Matter, in the lecture for week 2, hegemonic masculinity can interfere with men reaching out for help, even in cases where it would save the man's life, such as getting needed medical attention. One of the studies that I read talked about that. And in the course Black Minds Matter, Frank Harris said that men often dodge actions due to concerns that, quote, people will see me as less than a man and that's the last thing I want. Similarly, concerns about seeming weak can interfere with men reaching out for help, even in those cases where it could mean a matter of life and death. So certainly it could impact students when it could make the difference between completing their education or not. So, and the type of survey that I will use is a systematic sampling method. From a list of current male Ashford students, every 7th man is selected and invited to participate. No incentive is given to those who complete the survey. Qualtrics estimates it will take under 10 minutes to complete the survey, including about 5 minutes to read the informed consent document. 17 of the 21 questions use a 5-point Likert scale. The others are multiple choice. Here's what it looks like on a mobile device. And here's what it looks like on a PC. Only a few questions, such as this one, are specifically about algebra. I wanted to know what action students would take when struggling with a class and why our male students say they would dodge the tutoring. And then I wondered what would motivate male students to utilize tutoring. We know that people recycle when they know their neighbors recycle. So I wondered, would male students be more likely to use the tutoring if they knew that their other students were doing it? they knew other students were using the tutoring, or if they knew other students were benefiting from the tutoring. The survey is set up so that Qualtrics can ask half the students one question, half the other. There are 3 survey questions that will be asked 2 ways to elicit bias. So here's version A of the question, half the students will answer. And here's version B of the question that the other males, half of the students will answer. So we can see, would men be more influenced by knowing that their male counterparts in class or in other classes are using the tutoring? What else might impact tutoring usage? Well, attitudes toward other tutoring users. Tutoring is for people who aren't very smart. Projected attitudes toward tutoring users. My instructor will think I don't know the material if I use a tutor. So when you think about athletics, there are a lot of things that people see socialized in athletics that might look different if they're socialized in another area. So academic tutoring is receiving help and pointers in academic subjects, while athletic coaching is receiving help and pointers to excel in athletics. Although it's true that some bright students do receive individual one-on-one instruction. I'm thinking of a young woman that I tutored in Kentucky. I tutored her in algebra for money, and she tutored me in ice skating for free. But for some reason, when someone is coached in athletics, there's no stigma, whereas tutoring can have a stigma. I actually had one teacher say to me, you could just call it anything other than tutoring, just anything else. But even though gifted students do receive private instruction, because athletes visibly at the highest level receive coaching, not just struggling athletes, people think about, oh yeah, coaching in a different way. Further, many high-level athletes are heroes to many men and women. What if we refer to academic help as coaching, just like what is done in sports? Would that make a difference? So is how we describe getting help something that might impact the tutoring usage? Is it more appealing to describe it as coaching rather than tutoring? So there are a few questions on coaching. What are some other things that might impact tutoring usage? What about classroom factors? What if points were earned for it? This is already being done in some English classes. What if for the first 1 or 2 visits, points were earned? What if we stressed in the classroom the time-saving aspect of tutoring overall? What if we talked about coaching someone through some problems could save the person time? Would that impact it? What about the attitudes? What about student attitudes toward learning a particular subject? As some of you may know, I teach math, mainly algebra. So a few of the questions are specifically about algebra. Do students' attitudes toward learning algebra matter? For example, if students have the attitude, algebra won't have much to do with my life outside this class, does this correlate with their willingness to receive tutoring or to go to tutoring? So to summarize, what might motivate male students to utilize tutoring? I've mentioned a few things. Knowing others use or benefit from the tutoring, attitudes toward tutoring users, projected attitudes toward tutoring users. My teacher's going to think I don't know, or maybe someone else in my family or one of my classmates might think that. How educators and advisors describe tutoring, classroom factors such as if points were earned or if the time-saving aspect were stressed, and investigating student attitudes toward learning the subject matter. So what will we do if we discover that one or more of these things is the case, if our study shows this to be true? Well, if we find out that knowing others use or benefit from the tutoring positively affects tutoring usage among our male Ashford students, then we'll be sure that students know other students use and benefit from the tutoring. Publicize this. VP Mindy Sloan's office made a great video using students who are also employees, talking about how the tutoring has positively impacted their success in that particular class, and many of the people shown in that video are male. We could share specific stories from men who have used the tutoring to succeed academically in announcements and instructor welcomes and one-on-one when speaking to or advising students. Have you noticed that even though one particular one person's story statistically is not that meaningful, that it can be very compelling? I've seen this in the updates about Project Pineapple, and I've seen that it's sort of part of how human nature is. When raising money for people who need money for food, if you show a picture of one person that needs food, that will get a lot of people to call in. So hopefully sharing some specific stories one-on-one in announcements and instructor welcomes can make a difference if we find out that knowing others use or benefit from the tutoring makes a difference. What else? What if we find out that attitudes toward tutoring users that makes a difference. Well, we could address these negative attitudes in announcements, instructor welcomes, and one-on-one when speaking to or advising students. If we have the projected attitudes being a major factor, we could be sure that students know their teacher supports the use of the tutoring. Often if the teacher mentions it in an announcement and encourages students to use it, that can give a positive or a favorable impression. What else might motivate male students to utilize the tutoring? If we discover that how educators and advisors describe tutoring makes a difference, then we could refer tutoring using the optimal terminology, perhaps describing it as coaching, and we could do this especially when we're advising or teaching male Ashford students one-on-one. What about classroom factors? If we discover that earning points or knowing that time saving is something that happens when you use tutoring, if we know that that becomes a factor, we can make the first 1 or 2 tutoring visits graded assignments, as is already being done in some English classes. We can mention the time-saving aspect of tutoring and instructor welcomes and one-on-one when speaking to or advising students. What if we find out that the student attitudes toward learning the subject matter impact students' willingness to utilize the tutoring? Well, attitudes that negatively impact learning could be addressed by advisors, in instructor welcomes, and in the introduction thread. And who knows what else we will discover. I'd like to give a big thank you to Bethany Haywood, Lorraine Devas, and Jim Hardy for extensive help. Jim gave me extensive help on statistical methods, and Beth and Lorraine answered all my questions, and believe me, there were a lot. So thank you very much. Let me give you a little status summary. The summary was awarded the grant in February, received ORC's approval in August. The survey was inputted into Qualtrics in August and submitted to data management at the end of August. So that is still happening. The survey, the list of students has not yet been sent to me. So once that happens, students have been surveyed and the data analyzed by a professional statistical analysis. I will report out on the results in Q1 or Q2 of 2018. So at this time, we have time for questions if you'd like to ask questions in the chat. All right, I'm reading Millie's question about the Writing Center. That's excellent. So what Millie's suggesting is that having some do-it-yourself supports could be a great support for men or women who are not interested or not willing to use the tutoring. I couldn't agree more. We've made a video instructional material for all of the discussions in Math 221 and 222, the 2 algebra classes. And then there are supplemental videos that are available in every single class, like they're part of the discussion that students can click on, and they describe the most common errors and give answers. So I definitely agree that using some do-it-yourself support, such as tutoring or other ways to communicate the information so that the person doesn't have to ask. And now I'm addressing Melissa's question. Oh, thank you for your question, by the way. About the male prison population. Self-identity is definitely a key factor. Excellent, and maybe there will be something about that we can learn, that when someone sees their self-identity, that they can expand that. For example, if one person thinks, oh, only people who are not very bright get tutored, but then they find out that a peer, a classmate that they are working with is using the tutoring and perhaps is also male, that might widen the self-identity somewhat. But yes, self-identity is a big issue, and I know a lot of people are working on that. I'm interested to hear what other studies have come out on that so that we can incorporate those ideas. All right, thank you, Beth. And Becky, thank you, Becky. 30%, Lane, 30% of our Ashford students are male. But when we say that they reach out, even in taking into account that they're a smaller percentage, it's still the disproportionate number that reach out. So I believe I've answered all the questions in the chat. Thank you all for attending and participating, and I look forward to presenting out to the Doge group and to other groups who show an interest as the survey results become available. That's true. Not all the classes have tutoring. Ryan asked, how does Ashford pick the classes that will have tutoring? Well, VP Mindy Sloan's office does runs some numbers, and they have been able to select the next classes to offer. We take into account a lot of considerations. For example, in our very early classes, it's possible to offer free online tutoring, but the challenge is that may help some people to succeed who won't persist ultimately. So we want to strategically offer tutor in classes where students are really struggling. Accounting apparently is one that is a high need in addition to algebra and other math classes, algebra, statistics. And then after that, there's another tier. And I know at this point there are many, many classes that are in the queue to be offering tutoring. Yes, I think that's true, Lane, that the quantitative concepted courses got tutoring first. There's another factor or metric that Mindy Sloan's office used. She told me about it in 2016, so it's hard to bring it exactly to mind, but I know that they looked at several factors, and then they ran pilot studies, for example, with the early classes to determine whether using tutoring in that class ultimately positively impacted retention rather than simply helping students to succeed in that one class, but not in college overall.